We are.
Yeah. Hey guys, welcome to Trail Talk. Man, we're glad to see everyone today. Glad you could join us. We're here in our classroom studio.
Live Wacky Wednesday.
That's right. Yeah. The old Chisholm Trail Heritage Center in Duncan. Say hello. I'm saying hello to Stefan, our friend from Pennsylvania.
Longtime follower.
Yeah.
Trail Talk.
We haven't seen you in a while. Glad you could join us today. So we're going to talk about chuck wagons today. Now we did a really detailed
Deep dive
lesson about chuck wagons a year or two, well, not 2 years, but a year or so ago. And because we have the chuck wagon,
Right, we have it on exhibit
went
here.
around the chuck wagon with the camera and kind of went all into it and showed everything.
Right.
So today we're going to talk about chuck wagons, but we're going to talk about past and present. So we're not going to do as much history as we did before, because before we did the whole how they came about the
Right.
Studebaker brothers making the wagons
Right.
from the Civil War and all that kind of stuff. But we're going to pick up.
And yes, they are still around.
That's true. That's true. So we're going to pick up on this about the Charles Goodnight days of the chuck wagon. So you may be familiar, you may have seen the previous episode, but Charles Goodnight is credited with kind of the
Development.
the creation of
the tweaking.
of the chuck wagon. He saw a need that during the cattle drives, the cowboys had only what they could carry with them on their horse. They came with almost nothing.
Right, exactly.
That there needed to be hot food. I mean, they worked very long, very difficult days.
Yes.
And a hot meal was really important, both in the morning to get them started and in the evening to,
refuel.
Yeah, to refuel, get a good night's sleep. I mean, these guys worked 2-hour shifts through the night. Their work was
12,
never done.
16-hour days in the heat. And
Right. And for 1,000 miles, this was month after month. And so he could see the need for this. And the story goes that it was 1866, which was the year after the Civil War ended. He and Oliver Loving were driving cattle from Texas up to Colorado. Now, not all the cattle drives took the cattle to be put on a train and sent for slaughter. So some of them were sent to graze, fatten them up, or take them to a winter grazing area, or summer grazing.
Because they're sold by weight.
Right.
So the fatter, the more money.
And so Loving and Goodnight were going to do that. And Goodnight found a cook, and he and the cook went through an army surplus wagon. And the cook, I guess, just had, this is my wish list. And he just,
I need this and this. And
yeah. And he just told Goodnight everything that he would like be.
His dream wagon.
His dream wagon.
His dream wagon.
I'm sure that's not
It's
how
like the Griswolds and
Yeah.
the special order.
exactly family trust.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
But anyway, so this whole conversation, this thing birthed what became known as the chuck wagon. And Chuck, I realized Charles Goodnight.
Charles Chuck.
It was not associated with his name. It was simply that was an English term for food.
Right.
Really good hearty
Right,
food was
right.
called chuck. And so that became the name that they called the
Happy
wagon.
coincidence with the Charles.
Yeah,
Chuck.
and so some of the key features of a chuck wagon include, so they have this thing, they call it the boot, and which, in Britain, that's what they call the trunk of the car is the boot.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
and that's a small storage area. There was another storage area down underneath the main part of the wagon.
Kind of like had like a rack type.
Right,
setting.
right, and that allowed them to put like bigger things like bed rolls, poles, all sorts of things like that. Because sometimes this, I mean,
Ones you're used to seeing probably have the cover.
Yeah, more of the schooner look with the cover on it, but sometimes there would be a fly that they would, a dining fly is kind of what the scouts call it, but they would have another canvas thing that would come out from the top of this wagon right here. So they'd have poles
Right.
they'd use to set that.
Tailgating. type
Yeah,
thing.
exactly. Some of the things I read, looking this up, said this was like the forerunner of the food trucks.
So,
This is,
right, yeah.
which I thought was very
Yeah.
funny. But there's a flip down, so you can see these cubbies back here. Some of them actually had drawers in them.
And this tabletop.
Yeah, this tabletop flips up and seals that off and has a connector to keep it closed. I mean, just really practical.
I mean, the way that they designed this, every space of that had a purpose, just like
Yes.
everything they would take with them had a purpose.
Yes,
Because there
that-
wasn't much space.
Right, and yeah, they didn't just bring a bunch of extra things.
Yeah.
They had to have places to hang pots and pans, and if
The
there
cook
was a like there would had to be a container for the lard,
Mhm.
and so they had to have some, a place where they could set that where it wouldn't tip over.
Right.
They had the big Dutch ovens
Mhm.
and just all
Coffee
the
pot.
coffee pots. And every one of these chuck wagons had a place for a large barrel
Right, for water.
for water and a coffee grinder
The two-
attached.
You had to have your coffee, you had to have your water.
And I'm feeling that right
Yeah,
there. I'm
yeah.
thinking,
You put
absolutely.
me out there, I gotta have it.
Yeah, so here's another. This is a great shot of the chuck wagon being pulled by the mules. They typically always had a team of mules or oxen
Right. so the
that
horses
pulled the
didn't
chuck
fire.
wagon. In this Let's Talk About It book club thing that we're hosting,
Mhm.
we've been reading books about cowboys and trail drives. And they would use the mules and the oxen in times when the cattle got stuck in mud and they needed a
More
stronger,
sturdier.
sturdier animal. And so they would unhitch the wagon and use them if they needed to drag
Again.
poles.
More
to-
reason to bring it because more usage.
Exactly. And so they really thought all of, now I doubt if the very first.
I was gonna say,
cattle
the
drive-
first one probably wasn't as smooth sailing.
Right,
There
yeah.
was a note, there was a list
Yeah.
made along the
Yeah,
way.
exactly. But they really perfected this thing so that the team of animals used to pull this wagon, they could be depended on to get from point A to point B
Right.
in a day's time.
Because if they didn't cook food, water, all of that.
Exactly. Now, some of the things I read mentioned the cook would stop at lunch and cook a meal, but most of the things,
Things we read.
yeah, the cook would go and get to the place to start cooking the
Right,
nighttime
Where he would think
meal.
would be about as far as they go that day and start setting things.
Yeah,
up.
yeah. And so let's see, I have another one. This is a great picture of some cowboys.
Start chowing
This
down.
could be the beginning or the ending of the
Right.
day because they did not have chairs.
The meal was the same.
The meal was the same. Their lap was their
Mm-hmm.
tray where they put their plate. They might lean against their bed rolls. I mean, you can see there's not a tree in sight. This was
Yeah.
the way it was sometimes.
They might have even brought these pieces of wood with them.
Oh, well, yeah, that's
mean-
true. That's true. Sometimes they would find kindling, and if they saw some fire starters, they would pick those up along the way. Sometimes there would be a cowboy that would ride along with the chuck wagon. And so he might stop and pick up logs and things to start.
Just imagine if you get there to camp and it downpours.
Yeah.
You have no dry kindling, you have nothing to
Mhm.
start it with, or
Yeah.
your fire goes out because it's raining.
Right, right. So it was important for these guys. They were just a team, and the cook, he was right below the trail boss. He had so many responsibilities,
Many hats.
and like a cook would get up about 3 a.m. because he had to get the fire going, get the coals hot,
Make the coffee.
make the coffee, and then be able to bake the biscuits or whatever in those Dutch ovens. And you have to put hot coals on the top and the bottom.
And they started with dry beans, so
Yeah.
the beans had to be cooked.
Yeah, he had to start soaking the beans. I mean, there was just a lot to be done. And so he played a really important role. But this chuck wagon was an absolute necessity. It was,
It was like its own part, I mean, like person, like an
Yeah.
extension of the team.
yeah, that's really a good way to put it, because they had to have their chuck wagon, they had to have their cook.
Mhm.
Here's a really cool picture. This is a replica chuck wagon that's at part of the National Park Service, but you can clearly see over here this
That's
nice
a well-kept
barrel,
wagon.
right? You got your barrel, you got your coffee grinder, a lot of canned tomatoes. These books that I've been reading, they would bring canned tomatoes. And I thought, that's interesting. Well, tomatoes always add good flavor when you cook.
Mhm.
Well, no, they would have beans and stuff too, but tomatoes have vitamin C. And you know, you can't really live without having some of those other vitamins. And
Right.
so they would bring like canned tomatoes with them and
But
people
you,
would
I
eat
mean, you
them.
have to think, this is the time where you can't take your gummy in the morning, your gummy multivitamin,
Yeah,
you know, and your vitamin D and your aspirin and all that. You
Yeah.
have to get it where you can.
yeah, yeah. And so that was something that they would bring with them.
Because he was also the doctor.
Right,
I
right.
mean, he was.
Yeah.
So,
And they, they made do with what they had. They didn't always have milk, so their gravy was red eye gravy. It's probably made with coffee or, some water. Oh, there's water gravy
Mhm.
too. But you put enough seasonings and
Right.
fat and flour in
Right.
it, you can make
You're
it.
hungry enough, you're gonna eat it.
Yeah. They had to use lard to make the biscuits and just
Right.
everything. And they really did. They would take and slaughter a calf
Right. Or
occasionally.
they had an injured or sick
Mhm,
one
yeah,
along the way.
yeah, and they get some fresh beef. So
I mean, there were towns here and there. They
Uh-huh.
weren't like ran or just rapid up and down the trail. So if they needed to stock up, there
Yeah.
were some stops along the way.
Yeah. because they would literally use hundreds of pounds of different
Like dry goods.
food things during a 4 or 5 month cattle
You gotta
drive.
think how many people you're feeding
Mhm,
twice a day.
yeah, yeah.
So
So
they didn't waste anything.
yeah. So anyway, and so that's kind of, the background of the cooks.
Well, kind of like any other
And-
invention, there's a need or a problem and it gets solved
Uh-huh.
by an invention.
And invention,
This was kind
exactly.
of two-step. They also used something that was already available
Mhm.
to repurpose.
Right. And so, wagons continue to be used, not necessarily chuck wagons, but, the wagon itself until probably the 1920s is probably about the time they were completely phased out and gave way to automobiles. And, but here's the typical wagon. Now, this is a John Deere wagon, which I think is kind of interesting. But they have a front axle, there's a toolbox.
Look at that suspension.
Right,
that seat
yeah,
there.
yeah, there you got your little shock absorber there. But this is all the basic things that had to be in a wagon. And then for the trail drives, they came through and they added, it's like metal
Mhm.
under there instead of wood
Mhm.
to withstand.
For durability.
Yes.
For the long, rough terrain.
Yeah, exactly. And so they really bumped everything up in addition to just building.
Fortified
on- Yes, exactly. And those, the army wagons could have
Already
possibly
had that,
had some
right,
of
since
that.
they were military grade.
Mhm, yeah. But this is just the basic components of a typical wagon, and then think of what all they added for the chuck wagon. And that brings us to the present day chuck wagon.
You gotta show them
Okay,
now.
chuck wagons, really, people see them and they immediately think of the
It
past.
go hand in hand.
Right, I mean, the Western heritage,
The
that,
Cowboys.
yeah, the whole settling of the United States, that all happened during the days of the covered wagons.
Right.
So wagons are nostalgic in that.
Mhm.
But in Canada, this is a present day
It looks like
event.
NASCAR.
They have some serious chuck wagon
This
racing
one's like
going on.
sponsored by Tide, if I read that right.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah. So these, I mean, I read a lot of stuff. Some people feel like these horses are mistreated. Yeah, now I don't know why this only happens in Canada, but it does. I didn't find anything about any kind of races here in the US. But you can see they kind of pared down the wagon. They make it a little more aerodynamic. Mary and I go to the OU football games, and a couple of years ago,
Yeah.
the schooner
That was
tipped
not good,
over.
right.
Yeah, and that one is pretty big.
It's
and
pretty close to the,
And part of it fell off,
Right,
which caused it to tip over. But that one, you can tell they have to make that circle wide
yes.
and they have
start
to make
early.
it slow.
Mhm. And they
Because
have to know what they're doing.
Yeah.
Not just anyone can get on there and just
Exactly.
say go.
Yeah, so it's precision.
Mhm.
And so you can imagine what happens at these chuck wagon races.
It's like Chuck Wagon Derby.
Like they had Century Downs Racetrack and Casino presented the World Professional Chuck Wagon Association.
So there's a following.
And this was in August of this year.
That's hot.
They had a 5-day championship event where they have the chuck wagon drivers, and then they have other people who ride alongside them. They call them outriders.
Kind of like motorcycles, are they attached?
No, they're just people on horseback that have to come along too, and they'll have like different distances they have to travel. And when they cross the finish line, there are penalties for doing all these different
There's stipulations.
yeah,
different
yeah.
guidelines.
And so I mean, it sounds like a very involved.
I wonder if there's like a YouTube video.
I know. I really think they'd be kind of fun to watch. But yeah, these chuck wagons.
How long did they race? Does it say? Or
Well,
does it
this
say?
one was a 5-day. Okay, it says it's a team event led by a driver who commands a team of horses.
Okay.
And it's supported by 2 to 4 outriders, each racing individual thoroughbred horses that follow the chuck wagon.
Okay.
They begin with outriders breaking camp by tossing 2 tent poles and a barrel representing a camp stove into the back of the wagon before mounting their horses and follow the wagon as they complete a figure 8 around 2 barrels before circling the racetrack.
So it's kind of like they have to do this before they're allowed,
Yeah.
kind of like a tag team.
Yeah, and so the first wagon to cross the finish line typically wins, although various time penalties are handed out for infractions such as the barrel being knocked over, a tent pole or stove not loaded, wagon interference, or an outrider crossing the finish line too far behind the wagon driver.
Wagons racing.
Yeah, so there's rules.
That would be fun.
It would be, wouldn't it? If I ever get up to Canada for one of these. I did see something. What's that big place where they have the big rodeo in Canada? It's just across the line from Wyoming.
I'm
wonder
thinking
if it's
Las
on
Vegas
here.
in the finals, and that's all I can.
Oh, no, it's
Across
from at Wyoming, you cross into Canada. I mean, not Montana. At Montana, oh, what is that called? It says, no. It's a huge rodeo up there. Okay. You gonna look that up for us,
Did you get on
Emery,
board?
please? Canadian rodeo, please. Okay, and so in addition to chuck wagon racing, which is a present day event here. Oh, here's another good one. One thing I read was that women
Man, she is.
weren't
serious.
really, but this gal is up there.
She's standing. right
Look at
behind
how
the seat.
beautiful this one is painted
Yes.
too. I have a feeling presentation is kind of a,
Kind of like a pageantry. part of it.
yeah,
I
exactly.
imagine several of those that do those, maybe in parades and things locally in their
Oh.
hometowns, kind of like we.
Mhm. That's, I bet you're right. I bet
The
you're right.
name of the Calgary. race?
Calgary, that's it, Calgary Rodeo. It's across from Montana, isn't it? Right across the line. The Calgary Rodeo is probably a place where they have some of this stuff. So then you get into your chuck wagon cooking. And and they had chuck wagon cooking competitions all across the US.
Yes, I did not realize.
There was one in Duncan just this past weekend.
Yes,
What?
this past weekend they had the
Fairgrounds.
ranch rodeo at the fairgrounds. And one of the teachers who was here last week with her class, she was telling me that she was going to be competing
Oh, really?
in the bean cooking competition.
Bain cooking.
Yeah, she was
So they
one
had it
of,
broken down into different.
they have
foods.
different foods, different categories. Let's see. So, I thought it would be fun. Oh, okay. The food categories include meat, beans,
Mhm.
potatoes, bread, and a fruit dessert.
So things that they would have been able to cook traditionally.
Right, traditionally on the trail. So here are the food judging guidelines. I thought this would be fun for us to know.
Okay,
Okay, the food has to be cooked on site.
okay. You can't
Okay,
bring anything pre-cooked.
it has to be cooked the day of the cook-off using the food provided for the entries. So some
Whoever
places they
hosts it, they
they
provide the
provide
food.
things, yeah. Most condiments can be used at the cook's discretion. There are several ingredients that are prohibited. That's left up to the host. But use only the ingredients provided, no additions or substitutions.
Hmm.
So if they throw you lard, you can't be using butter or
Mhm.
shortening. You gotta
Right,
use the
right.
lard. Okay,
Right.
basically. Sanitation. I thought this
I'm
one
not
was,
sure if I want
yeah.
to.
Cooks are to prepare and cook food in as sanitary a manner as possible.
I knew that as possible was coming. I knew it.
Yeah, that's kind of open-ended there. Cooking conditions are subject to inspection by the head judge or his or her designee and the local health department.
How do you judge that?
I don't know. I don't know, but this is a thing from a
Okay.
certain
If it
competition.
was me, I'd want to see the records of who passed.
Foods prepared for the public, food prepared for the public should be the same as what's turned into the judges. No cooking separate food for the
Right,
judges.
so amping it
Yeah.
up.
I know that there is a limit to how much time you can have your food sitting out
Right,
because the
health reasons.
they
anyway.
talked to the cooks, these people who do the chuck wagon cooking they know.
Well, like I
these
said, I've been
rules.
telling, watching this show, there are certain temperature ranges
Uh-huh.
that make it unsafe. Like you have to, I think it was 240. You can't have it between 40 degrees and 140 degrees. That's your danger zone, is what
Oh,
if I
okay.
remember correctly.
Interesting.
Don't take my word on it. but
Yeah,
I
this
think
is, yeah, but
that's a Mary.
yeah. Anyway, and then event planning, the event planner should designate the type of food cooking, either trail or ranch or both. So there are different categories.
Okay.
And then keep it simple, fun, and authentic. If the idea is to maintain the heritage
Right,
of the chuck
authenticity
wagon.
of it.
Yeah, and so the chuck wagon cooking competitions are much more in that line than the chuck wagon racing.
Right, this is definitely more past.
But you can see here that this is their Dutch oven. They got a big old cobbler in there. And this is a metal plate on the ground covered in hot coals.
The plate kind of looks like one of those things, like a weightlifter, like a big,
Oh, yeah.
that's what it looks like.
Mhm. And then the cast iron Dutch oven is on top with all the food
Mhm.
in it. And then a lid goes over the top of it and it is
From the
also
top.
covered in the hot coals. So the top and the bottom are the heat sources.
Mhm.
Here these guys are mixing up some biscuit dough and you can see this modern day chuck wagon. It still has the same design. Do what? I don't know. I don't
Okay,
think so.
okay.
Yeah. But it's got the flip down
Mhm.
work surface. It's got the drawers here, the wagon, where they got a cover over it,
Right.
of course. But anyway, they keep their supplies and stuff in
This
this chuck
little
wagon.
barrel down here.
Yeah, yeah, it's just kind of, this is your basic look here. And then here we've got, they got a metal box here that they
Right.
got their firewood in.
Coffee, I'm assuming.
Yeah, this is because it not, they can't dig a hole
No.
or build a
Every time
fire
they stop.
every time they have one of these competitions. So they have these metal things, but they've got these hooks here with their big coffee pots, their cut wood. And then this guy over here, he's cutting his biscuits and putting them in this round pan here
Right.
that this looks like an aluminum
And
pan.
this looks like maybe he's proofing it or something.
Oh.
Looks like maybe a cloth over something.
Yeah.
Maybe. The dough
Uh-huh.
might be here.
Yep, he might very well
I
have
feel
some
like I know
stuff
what I'm
in
talking
there.
about. I've never made.
He's
dough
got
in my
a
life.
place over here to hold his knives. I mean, they,
And I've noticed too, they all have a clock.
mm,
I'm guessing because I mean, there's no time limit.
right.
You have to know when it goes.
Yeah.
down.
Yeah, that's true. So, I mean, it's just a very
It's
basic
amazing though,
thing. It is.
that we rely on so much and they were able to do so much with very little.
With very little, exactly. So one reason we decided to talk about chuck wagons today is because Saturday, October 1st, that's like today's Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday.
Right.
We are hosting our Western Spirit Celebration. This is our second year in a row. We've
Mhm.
had it for a number of years, took a few years off, and we're really bringing it back. And chuck wagon cooking
Mhm.
is one thing that we really wanted to highlight.
Mhm.
We have one chuck wagon that will be here. We're going to be serving biscuits from 10 to 12. And we're going to have a spreads competition where we have jam,
Jams,
jelly,
jellies.
apple butter, those kinds of things to eat on the biscuits. Butter making for the kids. And then 2 to 4, we're going to have cobblers
Right.
that we're serving.
That's right. 'Cause you gotta have cobbler.
Exactly. So we're gonna just have
Art project.
art projects. There's gonna be an author inside and there's gonna be entertainment going
Mhm.
the whole time from 10 in the morning to 5
We'll be here.
that evening. That's right. We will be here.
Mhm.
And it's
Free
free admission all day
Mhm.
to come inside to the Heritage Center. We're gonna have a
Never been
brand new featured artist
Yeah.
whose show kicks off that day, Mike Larson.
Mhm.
And so that's gonna be here. And when I say entertainment, I'm talking singers, instrumentalists.
I believe Lily
Miss-
Taylor's opening.
Miss Stevens County is
Mhm.
opening. We have Reese Williams,
There's gonna be Ringo, the
Just-
Longhorn.
yes, Ringo the
Come take your
Longhorn.
picture and
And
hang
there
out.
are gonna be working cattle dogs doing
Yes.
demonstrations 2 different times. Wallace Moore is gonna be here doing
Mhm.
some historical
Awesome
interpretation.
guy.
It is a very full but very fun and
Mhm.
exciting day. And like we
Something
said,
for everyone.
yeah, it's free. We'll be here all day.
If
Just
you've never been
come
here,
and
now's the
go.
time. I mean,
That-
why not?
Perfect.
We have air
exactly.
conditioning.
Yeah. And most of the Western Spirit things will be outside, but
Right.
I mean, we have our covered portico. There's
Mhm.
always a breeze. So
Oh, yeah.
we think it's going to be a super great day. We sure hope that you'll get a chance to come and join us. And oh yeah, I forgot about this part.
Oh, there's a score sheet
Yeah, here's a score sheet.
of what you can possibly score.
Yeah, now we won't be having like a score sheet.
No. Either
Um,
good, bad, or.
but these are things that people are required to have at certain competitions, and there's a point total, and
at
you,
that.
the maximum you can get is 150
Even down to the nuts and things on your.
on your
Chuck wagon.
chuck wagon. They have
And you have to have at least.
You have
2
to be
kerosene
dressed.
lanterns.
have to have what?
At least 2 kerosene lanterns working.
Yeah.
14.
Yes, yeah, 2 kerosene bedrolls. You have to have like medicinal alcohol, tobacco, all the stuff.
The wash basin.
Yeah.
basin And the razor.
Yeah, I mean, everything that you would have had to have.
Mhm.
It's
Otherwise,
required.
you get counted off. Or you
Yeah,
don't get those points.
Yeah, now we're not, our Western Spirit Day, we're not having a chuck wagon competition. We
No.
will have a chuck wagon here.
To
Yeah,
gaze upon it.
right,
like
for
that.
you guys to see,
Mhm.
and it is the competition kind.
Right. I believe he does do that.
Yeah, yeah. But hopefully we'll see you guys Saturday from 10 to 5. We'll be here and hopefully you'll come. Well, also happening that same day is Bark in the Park
Right.
at
So-
the Fuquay Park. So, I mean, make a full day
You
out.
end up there,
Yeah.
come see us.
Yeah. And tomorrow, our friend LaQuincy Reed, who has been at the Skirvin Hotel as the
Mhm.
artist in residence since
Amazing
like
artist.
February.
Yes.
His time there is kind of wrapping up. And so we're gonna talk to him and let him tell us about all the amazing experiences he's had while he's been up there as the artist in residence. And then he's going to be here as our featured artist, I believe in January.
I'm super excited.
I will tell you that for sure tomorrow, but yeah, it's gonna.
Definitely in 2023.
Yes, absolutely. So anyway, we have a super great program for you tomorrow and hope you guys can come and join us Saturday.
All right. Come see
And-
us, find us, say hi.
Yeah, exactly. And until then,
Happy
happy
trails.
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 Hi, Stefan.
Bye.